start again. Okay, so the next sutta, more about meditation practice. And this is another sutta that I usually read out on meditation retreats, because I think it kind of gives also another nice overview of what meditation is all about. And this page 49, this sutta is called Volition. And one of the things about the suttas, as always, is to kind of to understand which ones are really important, the ones that are included in the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 37 aids to awakening, right? I've been talking about all along here. And this particular sutta is almost like an expansion on the Bojjhangas, on the factors of awakening here. Very similar to the factors of awakening, you have a sequence, and a sequence that goes through the idea of virtue, sila, and then all the way to awakening itself, through all of those experiences that we have been talking about. And this particular sutta is about the first-person view. It's about how it feels to do this kind of things. Very similar to the Anapanasati sutta, but it adds a few things and it looks at a few things in a different way. And I think it is an important one, and it adds a few extra bits and details that are important, I think. So let's have a look at this sutta, and we will comment on it as we go along here. So, bhikkhus, for a virtuous person, one whose behavior is virtuous, no volition need be exerted. Let none regret arise in me. It is natural that non-regret arises in one who is virtuous, one whose behavior is virtuous. For one without regret, no volition need be exerted. Let joy arise in me. It is natural that joy arises in one without regret. For one who is joyful, no volition need be exerted. Let rapture arise in me. It is natural that rapture arises in one who is joyful. For one with a rapturous mind, no volition need be exerted. Let my body become tranquil. It is natural that the body of one with a rapturous mind is tranquil. For one tranquil in body, no volition need be exerted. Let me feel pleasure. It is natural that one tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, no volition need be exerted. Let my mind be stilled. It is natural that the mind of one feeling pleasure is stilled. For one who is stilled, no volition need be exerted. Let me know and see things as they really are. It is natural that one who is stilled knows and sees things as they really are. So, sometimes the first thing people say when they read the sutta, they say, "Oh, so boring." It says every paragraph is exactly the same. All they have is one word change. Right? It's kind of the modern way of looking at things. We need to change all the time. We need more experience. But what is interesting about this kind of repetition is that it sort of points to those things that are really important, right? Each paragraph, it kind of makes it very clear. There's one word which changes every time. So that word stands out with a lot of clarity. And that is the nice thing about the kind of repetitive usage of paragraphs in this way. It makes it very clear what is going on, what is important, what the focus should be on. And so that is the nice thing about this. And of course the reason why it is so repetitive in the first place is because it comes from an oral tradition. If you have an oral tradition, the only way you're going to remember something is if it is very repetitive in this way here. So it is all about using this wisely, and then it will be very useful. Now, so what is interesting about this? Now, the first thing that is interesting, of course, is just like in the previous sutta, you see that there is such an enormous focus on happiness, right? Even more so, just as much here as in the previous sutta, going from non-regret, which obviously is good, then you have joy, rapture, you have pleasure, you have tranquility, and then stillness. Almost the whole thing, all the way down is about happiness in one way or another. And that tells us, again, a lot about meditation practice, what meditation is really about. Happiness, so crucial on the path of meditation. Here we are looking at one of those suttas that, again, is core, right? Essential, one of those suttas that you find everywhere in various variations. And the emphasis, so powerful on the idea of happiness. So that is important, and that tells us also a lot about our own meditation, what kind of meditation will work and what kind of meditation won't really work. If you experience a lot of pain and suffering in your meditation, then the chances of getting into these sort of states are very slim, right? Because having all that suffering in your body, having all the problems there, is actually moving away from the happiness rather than moving towards the happiness. It's important to remember these things. We need to find that middle way. And once you find the middle way, which is neither hurting the body nor indulging the body, that is where these spiritual happinesses that you find here, where they can arise, where the body becomes irrelevant. The body fades away. No pleasure nor pain to be had through the body. So, as always, it is the emphasis on happiness in the sutras is very powerful and very strong, and especially when it comes to meditation practice, as you hear, a gradual movement towards more and more happiness. So this, what you're seeing here, is really the first-person perspective, how everyone ideally is supposed to experience meditation. And for this reason, it's also interesting because it gives you like a map, right? Signposts, tells you whether you're heading in the right direction, little notes kind of popping up in your mind. Okay, joy, okay, this is right, I'm on the right path. Rapture, okay, you don't have to note these things, they're just there. You're just aware that these things happen. So this idea of having a clear guide, a map, is always important. And this is almost like the opposite side of the, when we looked at the gradual training, what we're looking at there is what we are supposed to do. It gives us the guide, okay, you are kind, you restrain the senses, you have full awareness, these kind of things. It tells you what you're supposed to do. This one here tells you more about how you are supposed to experience things. So it's two sides of the same coin. One shows you how you're supposed to behave, the other one shows you what you're supposed to experience. So two different ways of looking at the path, right? This is kind of the genius of the Buddha, showing you different ways of looking at the same thing, in a sense. So this is what is interesting about this one. Now, one of the very interesting things about this particular sutta is this little phrase that each one of these steps has, and that is, no volition need be exerted. Right? Volition, first of all, means the will. It means the doer inside of you. It is not a very common word, so if you don't know it, it's not exactly very strange, but it is the will inside of you. That is the meaning by volition. And the Pali says, na chetanaya karaniya, is what the Pali says. And quite literally, what that means, it means that not to be done by an act of will. That's what it means. Right? This cannot be done by an act of will. No volition need be exerted is really a bit of an understatement. It's actually much stronger than that. It literally says this is not to be done, cannot be done by an act of will. And of course, what that means, it means that if it cannot done by an act of will, then the will is superfluous. In fact, the will actually gets in the way. If it doesn't help you and you start using it, then it is a problem. It is something which has no part of this progress in meditation. And again, it shows you, it strengthens the argument from the previous sutta, as we have seen, that idea that you just sit back and you watch the breath and you allow the breath to be. This is just more of the same kind of instruction that you're seeing here. It's very similar to the kind of instruction you hear from Ajahn Brahm. Those of you who have been on Ajahn Brahm retreats, he just says, just sit back and bliss out. That's what he says, basically. Simple instruction, right? But sometimes it doesn't really work. So you think, wait a minute, something is missing here. But it's basically what the Buddha is saying as well. It's just that, so basically that is what it's saying all the way through. No volition is required on this path. It is an automatic progress. As it says here, it is natural, right? It is natural that one thing arises when the other one has already arisen. It is according to nature. It is a law that these things happen in this particular way here. And what, of course, is interesting about this is that if each step here arises naturally from the previous one, what that means is that the very first step is very important, right? If all the other ones arise naturally, well, you can't do much about that. So what we really need to do is focus on the very first one. If you get the first one in place and you get that one done right, then all the other ones will happen as a matter of course. And, of course, what is the first step? Surprise, surprise. It is Sila, yeah? Always the same, right? Yeah, no Sila, no Samadhi, exactly. And this is kind of interesting because you see how the suttas always work together. They're always saying the same thing, but from slightly different angles. We have seen this now, 10 times or something over the past few days. How Sila is the foundation for everything. Here again, see exactly the same thing. And it just shows us once again that once you get that Sila into place, then things start to arise, right? The more profound, the more, over the longer term that you actually practice this, meditation will start to happen as a consequence. So that is one end of this thing. The other end, which also is worthwhile pointing out again, is that at the very end there it says, for the one who has the stilled mind, he does not need to, he cannot, no volition can be exerted, but then he knows and sees things as they really are. It is natural that one who is stilled knows and sees things as they really are. So stilled here, of course, is samadhi again, right? Same thing was seen before, and it happens. It happens according to nature that when you have samadhi, then the insights must happen as a consequence. And again, this is also something that we have seen again and again as we've been going through this, the connection between samadhi and profound insight into the nature of reality. Here it's called seeing things as they, according to reality, might be a slightly better translation, but this is what it is called in this particular case. So, this is this sutta, and I think it's one of those very beautiful suttas, quite simple, quite straightforward, but the message is very powerful. So let's just quickly run through the sequence. So you start off by being virtuous. Again, your character, your entire personality is being purified. And because you purify that personality, you have no regrets. And regrets here means many things. Of course, it means kind of things like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. That's kind of one regret, right? But very often, regret is not as powerful as that. Often regret is much more subtle, and it's just a kind of dampening down of some of the mindfulness, it makes your mind a little bit more dark. It is not as bright as it would otherwise be. And energy, one of the ways you can see it, the energy of the mind is dropped. If you do something bad, often the energy fades away at the same time. So all of these things is really what is meant by non-regret. The mind is not as beautiful, as radiant, as it doesn't have those wonderful qualities that we would like it to have. That is part of this non-regret thing. Not just, kind of out and out. Oh no, that was a silly thing to do. Not just that kind of thing. So of course, and then if that non-regret is taken, really kind of reduced to almost zero, it means that the mind is the opposite. It is bright, it is happy, it is joyful, it is mindful, it has energy. It is the opposite of being dark, of being kind of dragged down into the mud, which is what you do if you don't practice virtue. And then, because you have that non-regret, it means, of course, then naturally, again, the joy arises. And the initial joy here is a very simple kind of joy, so often translated as gladness. Pamudja is the Pali word. And it's just kind of this initial stages of gladness that almost everybody experiences every now and again. Except if you are a depressed person, of course, you want to experience these kind of things. But if you are in an ordinary state of mind, you're not depressed, you're kind of some days good, some days not so good. If you're an ordinary person, occasionally you will experience this kind of gladness in life, right? A sense of joy arising, feeling good about yourself, feeling good about the world, until you turn on the television and you feel bad again afterwards. Watching the news, right? That was a major mistake. It is very close to mudita, pamudja. Yeah, it is kind of from the same kind of root, I think. Mudja, mud and mudita. Yeah, it's very similar in meaning here. And then what you do, so now we are getting into the meditation practice. This is where meditation takes over. And as the meditation takes over, that joy becomes deeper. And then that deepening of the joy then moves you from mudita to piti. And that is where you start to feel it also physically, right? And then when you feel it physically, you keep on, as I was we're looking at before, keep on watching the breath. That physical feeling dies down because it is quite coarse. And it becomes a state of tranquility, a state of peace instead, even more powerful happiness. And then as that tranquility takes over, you get a very subtle and beautiful state of sukha. And this is what here is called pleasure. It really means happiness, a deep state of very peaceful happiness. It's when you're sitting there, you feel like a rock, right? It's really happy rock sitting on your seat. And that's all you're doing, nothing else. And you don't want to go anywhere else in the whole world. And because you don't want to go anywhere else, you are completely content with what you have. You have this beautiful object in the mind. That is why the mind becomes stilled, because it doesn't want to go anywhere else. So the stillness, the samadhi, arises from the happiness in the mind. And then when the mind is stilled, because it has let go of so many things, because it has let go of all the distortions in the mind, all the hindrances, and you have already seen a lot of fading away already, when you come out of samadhi, you naturally see things according to reality. It just depends there what you're focusing on. Whatever you focus on, you will see it according to the three characteristics. This is what it means to see things according to reality. And then it happens as a consequence of that. So this is the Volition Sutta, an important sutta for understanding the process of meditation. And one of the best things about that one is this idea, no volition, right? Volition can't do it for you. The will is not going to work. You have to do these things in a different way.
There is a number 9, then it could be vipassana, isn't it?
Number 9 is nibbida, which is repulsion. Because once you see things according to reality, that is when you get repelled from things, right? So number 9 is repulsion. Okay, after number 9 comes viraga and nirodha, which is fading away and cessation. You get repelled, and then I think it's just viraga actually. Yep. And then she knows more than me, so that's really good actually. I really like that. So viraga means that basically it's the opposite of attaching to things. Things are fading away. Your craving is dying down. That's what it means. And then comes vimutti after that. And sometimes they also have vimutti nanadasana as well, knowledge and vision of liberation. So depending on how many factors you have. So vipassana is not mentioned in that sequence at all. And the reason why it's not mentioned, because vipassana is all the way through here. When we talk about seeing things in accordance to reality, we're talking about a particular strong type of vipassana. It's a very strong vipassana at that point. Vipassana is understood all the way through here. Okay. So now I would like to. What shall we do next? This is actually very similar again. So let's maybe. Okay, so let's have a look at this next sutta here, the Mahanama Sutta. Yes, please.
Are these all known as unworldly pleasures?
Yes, they are unworldly happinesses. Yeah. The question is, are these all unworldly happinesses and joy? Yes, they are all unworldly. Because these are the things that are not related to sensual pleasures, anything like that. These are the pleasures of the mind, so it's all unworldly pleasures. But they are still a little bit tainted, right? Because you haven't attained the jhanas yet. The jhanas are still to come. We're still waiting for that to happen. So hopefully that will happen before the end of the retreat. We will see. We'll see if we get there or not. And if not, then... But we are moving kind of now. We're on the cusp between the two, moving towards the unworldly pleasures. Yeah. Say again?
Is adhitthana part of willpower?
Adhitthana, which is often kind of resolving on something and resolution and these kind of things. The 10 paramis are not really in the suttas. The 10 paramis are a kind of a later thing. It doesn't really come from the Buddha as such. So I personally, I never take the paramis all that seriously as a part of the path. For me, the part of the path is the Noble Eightfold Path. That's really the path of Buddhism. The 10 paramis is a development that happened in the Pali commentaries and also happened in Mahayana Buddhism. They did it in slightly different ways, but it has to do with the Bodhisattva path, really, here. It's related to that. So I have never taken those too seriously, and the idea of using aditana in the suttas actually is not really mentioned quite in that way in the suttas at all. So again, there's a danger there. If you make aditanas, this kind of, there's always a danger of perhaps using too much willpower in that kind of situation. Yeah? Yes?
Ajahn, when seeing things as they really are, at that stage, does it refer to actually physically seeing like rivers, mountain fading away, or is it actually just the inner realization and...
It's an inner realization, right? But it means that everything you experience, you understand it in the right way here. So it also has some relation to the outer world as well, because you understand that everything in the world is impermanent, is suffering, is non-self. So it relates to everything, your entire experience. So when I mean experience, when you talk about the outer world, like a mountain, for example, you see a mountain or a river or whatever, in the end, it is your experience of that which matters. It is the mountain itself. It's nothing apart from your experience, really, at the end of the day. And your experience, everything within your field of experience, will then be understood by you as having the 3 characteristics: impermanent, suffering, non-self. So it is inner, but it includes everything here. Yeah? And this is kind of out... Personally, I don't really... Even the outer phenomena are, in a sense, inner. Because when you see a mountain, where do you see it? You see it in your head, right? That's where you see it. Whether it is out there or not is kind of irrelevant. From your personal perspective, you see it inside of you. You can dream about the mountain. You can think about it afterwards, even though it might be out there. So it is your personal experience that really matters. So everything in your personal experience is understood in the 3 characteristics. Yeah. Okay, so now let us have a look at the Mahanama Sutta. Mahanama was a cousin of the Buddha, and when the Buddha went back to Kapilavatthu, where the Sakyans were, because they were all Sakyans, they were all part of the same family, then they would sometimes meet and they would have conversations, and there are a few conversations between Mahanama and the Buddha in the suttas. So he was a lay person, a layman, but he was one of these very saintly lay people, and he was said to be a noble disciple who was a stream enterer at that time, maybe even a once returner, some people say. So he was obviously quite exceptional. But this is one of these nice exchanges between the Buddha and Mahanama. And we are still now dealing with how samadhi comes about. This is still about the practice leading to samadhi. So this is similar to sammasati, to the satipatthana practice, the 7th factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. And when I'm moving, showing the movement from sati to samadhi, how it actually happens, how it comes about, right? Very similar to the previous suttas, but it gives a slightly different angle on these things. So, on one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Sakyans at Kapilavatthu in the banyan tree park. Then Mahanama the Sakyan approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and said to the Blessed One, Bhante, how does a noble disciple who has arrived at the fruit and understood the teaching often dwell? And so here, of course, the idea of a noble disciple who has arrived at the fruit and understood the teaching obviously refers here to a stream enterer, right? Somebody who is an Arya already. So how does the Arya often dwell? And this is what the Buddha has to reply. This does not mean that this passage is only for Aryas. It is only Aryas who can practice these things fully, but it is something that all of us can do to some extent. And there are teachings given to other monks, other people in the suttas who are not Aryas and with a similar kind of similar kind of teaching to it. So the Buddha says, Mahanama, a noble disciple who has arrived at the fruit and understood the teaching, often dwells in this way. Here, Mahanama, a noble disciple, recollects the Tathagata thus. The Blessed One is an arahant, perfectly awakened, accomplished in true knowledge and conduct, fortunate knower of the world, unsurpassed trainer of tameable people, teacher of gods and humans, the awakened one, the Blessed One. Yeah, we have seen this before already at the beginning of the gradual training. That is what we took almost a full session just to talk about that formula. And remember, this is why I said this formula is so important, right? Because here it comes in the recollection of the Buddha, how we recall the Buddha. And then when you do recall Buddha in this way, thinking about it in a meaningful way, then this is what happens. When a noble disciple recollects the Tathagata, on that occasion his mind is not obsessed by greed, hatred, and of greed, anger, and confusion. On that occasion his mind is simply straight, based on the Tathagata. A noble disciple whose mind is straight gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the Dhamma, gains joy connected with the Dhamma. When he is joyful, rapture arises. For one with a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. One tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, the mind becomes stilled. This is called a noble disciple who dwells in balance amid an unbalanced population, who dwells unafflicted amid an afflicted population. As one who has entered the stream of the Dhamma, he develops recollection of the Buddha. Right? You recognize this, right? It's so many similarities here to the previous sutta we looked at. You have the whole sequence there of how the mind develops with joy all the way to samadhi, exactly the same sequence as before. But here it shows you how that sequence comes into being. This shows you one of the skillful means, if you like, of actually giving rise to that joy in the mind. Sometimes just watching the breath is not enough. It doesn't give rise to this. And if that isn't enough, then sometimes we need to kind of encourage the mind a little bit to give rise to the joy that is there if we reflect in the right way. And this is what we reflect, remembering the qualities of the Buddha. And as you do that, the defilements, that's what it says here, the mind is not obsessed by the defilements. The mind is simply straight, based on the Tathagata. The idea of straight, ujju in Pali. And the idea is that if the mind has defilements, it is crooked. Crooked, right? Like it is bent, in other words. It is not straight. It is kind of seeing things in a flawed way. It is distorted in the way it sees things. And that's why it is called crooked. But at this occasion, the mind is straight. It means that you have a degree of vipassana. You're seeing things in the right way here. And this is what this is about, not being deluded, being distorted and biased by all of these defilements of the mind. And that happens simply because you're thinking about the Buddha in the right way. Thinking about the Buddha in the right way, the power of that is that it abandons the defilements of the mind. And that is why it is so powerful, and that is why it becomes the foundation for this whole thing. Right? So a noble disciple whose mind is straight, when the defilements go away, you gain inspiration. Veda is the Pali word. In the meaning, atta Veda, you gain inspiration in the Dhamma, Dhamma Veda. In Veda is this a nice word which means a mixture of feeling and understanding. So it is very, I think the translation by inspiration actually is very nice, because when you feel inspired about something, in the English language, inspired means on the one hand that you have understood something, so you feel inspired to do the same thing. On the other hand, inspiration is a feeling, it's a positive feeling that draws you forward, right? I feel inspired. It's kind of a positive feeling. You want to start doing things. So this is very similar to this idea of being inspired. So you gain inspiration in the meaning. You understand the goal of this teaching. teachings, you understand what they're all about, right? Where they are heading. Atta means the goal. You have an idea about what Nibbana is all about. You understand that it's about happiness and overcoming suffering. And when you feel that, right, where this is heading, what it is all about, wow, you get really inspired. Because you understand that this is really about the meaning of life itself. There is nothing else in life that really is meaningful. This is it. Now you are doing that which actually matters in life. And of course, when you feel that, obviously you're going to feel happy as a consequence. Inspiration in the Dhamma, you feel inspired by the teachings, because these teachings are the teachings that move you towards that goal, move you towards that meaning that it's all about, all concerned with. And because of that, the joy arises, pamujja again, joy connected with the Dhamma. And then, of course, the whole thing just takes over from there, right? The joy has arisen, and now you might go to the breath, or you might just stay with the recollection, or whatever you want to do. And from that, all of these beautiful things happen as a consequence. Just the same things that we saw in the previous sutta. The rapture comes, the tranquility comes, the pleasure, the happiness comes, and eventually the mind is stilled. And of course, when that happens, then it says here, you are a noble disciple who dwells in balance amid an unbalanced population. Your mind is even, your mind is moving along. You're no longer being driven around by ill will, aversion, and desires, right? This is kind of the samadhi mind, really kind of smooth mind that you have at this particular time. You dwell unafflicted, you have less suffering, right? In an afflicted population, you're not afflicted by the, especially by these defilements that makes life very unpleasant. And this is part, a very big part of the idea of affliction in Buddhism. And as one who has entered the stream of the Dhamma, you develop the recollection of the Buddha. So that shows you how there are this is called the Buddha Nusati in the suttas. And in a second we will have a look at some of these other Anusatis. And Buddha Nusati is one of the things that is one of the bases for joy. This is one of the things that you see in many, many places in the suttas again. It is again one of those central aspects of the Buddha's teachings. How to develop this joy. How to move from an ordinary state of mind to a state of samadhi. How it actually works is what it shows you here. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We don't have to spend that much time on these things because, basically because we haven't got that much time, but... But also because I think it is probably reasonably straightforward, although it would have been nice to spend more time on it, but, such is life. You can't do everything every time, so that's okay. Again, Mahanama, a noble disciple recollects the Dhamma thus. The Dhamma is well expounded by the Blessed One, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. When a noble disciple recollects the Dhamma, on that occasion his mind is not obsessed by greed, anger and confusion. On that occasion his mind is simply straight, based on the Dhamma. A noble disciple whose mind is straight gains inspiration in the meaning, gains inspiration in the Dhamma, gains joy connected with the Dhamma. When he is joyful, rapture arises. For one with a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. One tranquil in body feels pleasure. For one feeling pleasure, the mind becomes stilled. This is called a noble disciple who dwells in balance amid an unbalanced population, who dwells unafflicted amid an afflicted population. As one who has entered the stream of the Dhamma, he develops recollection of the Dhamma. So here we are using the teaching as the same device. Before talking about the Buddha, now we are using the Dhamma, the teaching, as a recollection. And one of the main factors here about this teaching, of course, is this idea that it is immediately, directly visible. All of these things are about that almost. It is immediate, this is akalika, in other words, it is visible here and now, or in this life, rather, to be more appropriate. Which is more correct, inviting one to come and see, similar kind of thing, right? You come now and you see it here in this life. Applicable opanayika means that it is something that moves forward. It is something that kind of goes forward on the path, further and further, this Dhamma, until eventually it is personally experienced by the wise. And that is slightly problematic. You have to be wise to experience this, right? So sometimes people say, oh, I'm not sure if I'm wise enough. Maybe this will not work. But wisdom is something that you develop as you go along. It's not a static thing. So you, even if you haven't got the wisdom now, then maybe one day you will get there. And this is really the point here. So a lot about this, a lot of the inspiring thing about the Dhamma is that it is this teaching that is visible here and now. First of all, as I said yesterday, I think, it is visible here and now in the sense that the highest parts of this path can be realized in this life. Most teachings in this world, you have to wait after you're dead, right? After you're dead, you will realize whether it's true or not. But if it wasn't true, it's a bit too late at that point. And this is kind of the nice thing about the Dhamma. It actually is available before you die. You get some feeling before you die whether it is right or not. And you start off in small way. Addi kalyanang, beautiful in the beginning, right? Beautiful in the middle. So all the way it should have beautiful results in this way. And that is what the Dhamma is about. So you should see that, see the results straight away in your practice. This is one of those powerful things about the Dhamma. And if you don't see those results, then all you have to do is apply yourself in the right way. And as you do that, things will start to come together. When they start to come together, you get really much more confidence and faith in this path. And then you blossom, right, in this practice. And it really works so well. So that is about this Dhamma. You understand this teaching that only gives you one thing: reduction in suffering, improvement in happiness. And it starts now, at this moment, if you do it in the right way. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that there is such a teaching in this world. And of course, it is the outcome of the qualities of the Buddha that we talked about before. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Again, Mahanama, a noble disciple, recollects the sangha in this way. The sangha of the Blessed One's disciple is practicing the good way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individual. This sangha of the Blessed One's disciple is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. And then the same thing again. When the noble disciple recollects the sangha on that occasion, his mind is not obsessed by greed, anger and confusion. On that occasion the mind is simply straight, ujju, based on the sangha. And then, of course, you gain all of these things: inspiration and the meaning and the Dhamma, joy and then rapture, then tranquility, then pleasure and then stillness. And then you are this person who is in balance, right? In an unbalanced population, and unafflicted in an afflicted population. So here we recall the Sangha, and the Sangha that you specifically recall here is the Aryan Sangha, the noble ones. That is the meaning of the 4 pairs and the 8 types of individuals. So the stream enter, the once returner, non-returner, and the Arahant, and those on the path to that. That's what it means, 8 types of individuals. And what is so great about them, what is so good about them is because they have seen the Dhamma, because they know the path. That is why they are practicing that path perfectly. That's why they're called practicing the good way. Supatipanno, actually practicing well, would be a much better way of putting it. They're practicing well. They are practicing straightly, ujju patipanno, doing the straight practice. Practicing the true way, nyaya patipanno. This is practicing according to dependent origination. That's what it literally means. Nyaya is dependent origination. So how can you practice according to dependent origination? How's that possible? And the answer is that, remember, dependent origination has 2 modes to it. One is the forward mode, whereby you say that from avidya comes dukkha through the 12 links. Starting with avidya, you end up with suffering as a consequence. And then there is the other mode, which is the cessation mode, which tells you that when avidya ceases, then every link through dependent origination also ceases, ending with the cessation of dukkha itself, with suffering itself. That is what dependent origination says. So what you are doing here, when you're practicing according to dependent origination, you are practicing according to the cessation mode of dependent origination. You're practicing dependent cessation, if you like. You are reducing avidya at the root of dependent origination. And as you are reducing that, you are gradually chipping away at dukkha, less and less dukkha, until dukkha is completely eliminated. Yeah, so this is practicing according to dependent origination. Practice in the proper way, samichi patipanno. Samichi just means that, proper or appropriate way. That's really what it is all about. So this is the sangha, right? And sometimes the way that I like to think about the sangha, I like to think about some of those extraordinary people that exist in the world in the present day. And sometimes you are lucky to meet these people because they really are quite, in many ways, quite exceptional. And when you meet them, you kind of feel that the sangha is still alive, that these people still exist in this world. And that is such a wonderful thing. And you know, some of those very simple stories. Last year I went to Thailand and I met one of the great Ajahns in Thailand called Ajahn Ganha, who I know some of you have heard of. He's been to Bodhinyana Monastery a few times, and he's a very, very nice monk, you know, really quite exceptionally nice. And I went to see him, and I don't know, has anybody been to see him in his monastery? You have? Okay. So, okay, you've been there as well. Okay, great. And you know what? He sits there, and he has this big bowl of sweets next to him, right? You seen that? Yeah. And then he has a little dipper into the sweets, and all the people, and he throws the sweets out on everybody, kind of raining sweets. And it is quite sweet, right? No. It is very sweet. But it's sweet because it symbolizes, the sweet is sweet when you eat it, but it's also full of metta at the same time, because he has this very kind of metta kind of personality. He doesn't say very much. He doesn't have to say very much. People just come and they sit down in his presence and they just relax, you know, and they feel good. And that's what it's all about, going visiting Ajahn Ganha. So I went to visit him last year, and that was... I saw those things for the first time, and I was a bit... First, when you hear the stories like that, you think, oh, maybe this person is a bit funny, what's going on here? But when you are there and you see it, it's actually very natural and very easy and very nice. And one of the monks from our monastery also went to visit Ajahn Ganha. He went a year before I went there. And he asked Ajahn Ganha about one of these stories, because there's all of these ajahns, there are stories about them, and you're never really sure if they're true, because very often it's never you never meet the actual person. You always just hear a story. Somebody else did it, right? You never actually see the actual person. So here he had the chance to meet the actual person who the story was about. And this story is, many of you will probably have heard this story before. This was a story when Ajahn Ganha was a monk in Thailand a while ago, and he had a large group of monastic disciples, and they were doing tudong. They were walking around the countryside, walking from one village to the next one. This traditional practice of Buddhist monastics of being homeless. And they would walk around. This was when there was still forest in the northeast of Thailand. And one evening they would come to a certain village. And often when they came to a village, they would speak to the headman of that village and say, we would like to stay in the forest near your village. Is that okay? And can we come for pindabat in the morning? Because then the villagers know that you are there. They will have the food ready in the morning when you come out. Otherwise, they have no idea that you will come, right? So, okay, no problem, says the villager. And then the monks go off into the forest and they sit down to meditate, which monks often do. Right, so it's getting a bit kind of in the afternoon perhaps, and they're all sitting down with closed eyes, and then they hear this sound, right? Something is coming towards them. Oh, scary. And the sound then gets louder and louder and louder. The villages are long gone. There's no villages there. But this sound, kind of slightly slithering sound, right? Getting more and more intense, more and more noisy. And eventually they have to open their eyes and see what's going on. And right there, in front of Ajahn Ganha, is a king cobra, right, looking at him straight into his eyes. Man and snake looking at each other like that, right? So most people, if you had a king cobra, like kind of, right in your face, you probably die of shock or something, because it's kind of very, very extremely scary animals, apparently, these king cobras. But Ajahn Ganha, he's so famous for his metta, so he knows that if it moves quickly, he will scare the snake. So very carefully, he lifts up his hand, right? And then he pats the snake on the head. King Cobra, right? Pats the snake on the head and says, "Thank you for visiting us. Very nice to see you here. Now please move on." So that is the power of metta. And then, of course, the snake goes down, because sometimes animals can feel these things. But the snake goes down and then moves on. And I think this is probably Ajahn Brahma's exaggeration, right? But then Ajahn Brahma says, well, he moves on to the next monk, and the next monk just runs away because he's too scared to deal with that. But that is an astonishing thing, because king cobras, I have never seen a king cobra, but those people who have seen those animals, it's like there's a sense of fear, a very very, very scary situation, because they are so large, right? And they are so incredibly poisonous. In Thailand, or not so, actually the poison isn't all that strong apparently, but there's a lot of it, because they are such big animals. And in Thailand, the king cobra is called the one-step snake. You know why it's called the one-step snake? You have got one step and then you're finished. Oh, that's pretty scary. So, yes, Le Young. Was he? Oh, really? He came here to the... okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. He has a monastery in Malaysia, is that right? Somewhere. Doesn't he have a monastery here? He doesn't? Okay. His disciple has a monastery. Okay, so it's connected to him somehow. Okay, very good. Okay, great, yeah. So I'm glad you had the chance to see him. That's always very nice, very peaceful and good monk. So this is the kind of thing, and not only that, but also when you hear about monks or nuns who live very secluded lives. This is one of the things that I find so inspiring, when they live in absolute seclusion. If you go, there isn't that much forest left in in Thailand now, but in places like Sri Lanka, there are still monks living in absolute seclusion, really far away. It is, really, really forest monks. And the way they live, they have this tiny little kuti in the forest, and this one monk, he has this famous for having the 3-walled kuti. One wall is complete, there's no wall, right? It's just open to the forest, because it says the kuti is supposed to be like a cave, right? Otherwise, so it feels like a cave. So, of course, what happens is that during the night when you're sleeping, all these animals come into your kuti, right? So you wake up in the morning, you have this kind of strange animal next to you, like, snakes or whatever, right? So you say good morning to the snake or whatever it is that you have to do. And this particular monk that I happen to know about, actually I have never met him, but anyway, whatever, he then lives like that 51 months of the year. And every day he goes for pindabat into the local village, gets his food, goes back to his kuti, and doesn't see anybody apart from those villagers who give him pindabat every day. And then 1 week in the year, he goes in to meet the other monks, and they have a Dhamma discussion together, right? About high Dhammas, about Nibbana and whatnot. And that's how he lives. He's been living that for 30 years, right? Most people will go completely mad if they had to live like that. Really, really simple life. And it's so inspiring, because these people are often very happy people. They're far more happy than ordinary people in the world, right? Happiness on a very different level. And what you realize when you see people like that is that there is another happiness in this world that is much more profound, far more important than the ordinary happiness that people have. That is what you realize, because otherwise, how would you be able to live like that and still be radiant, still be happy, still have the sense that there is something deep going on inside, still be peaceful, having all these qualities? Yeah, it's a bit like Ajahn Brahm when he went on retreat many years ago now, it's about 10 years ago, and he went away for 6 months. He didn't speak to a single person for 6 months, right? And he said that those 6 months, he stayed inside his kuti or on his walking path entirely for those 6 months. The kutis at Bodhinyana Monastery, there are about 7 square meters. right? So that's very, very small. And the walking path outside. And then he did nothing except meditation, and he had one copy of the Majjhima Nikaya, and he read the Majjhima Nikaya. That's all he ever read on those 6 months. That's all he ever did. So imagine doing that for 6 months. Just the Majjhima Nikaya and yourself, your walking path and your kuti, and that's all you have. And then, of course, he comes out the other end. 6 months of bliss. Don't really want to come out again. And who are these monks, by the way? I can't recognize them anymore. Given up on his monks. And there are a number of people like that. But what is so inspiring about it? It shows you that the ideal of Buddhism, it is still alive in this world, the real ideal of the forest people. And it's so inspiring because it shows you a different reality that is possible, a different way of looking at things. And it kind of gives you a very strong feeling that Buddhism is still alive, not just as a theoretical concept, but as a real lived reality. That is what is so beautiful about it. So these relics we have upstairs, right? These are the monks that in the future will make relics. So in the future people will worship these relics of these people in the same way. But now you can see them alive, right? Much, much better to see them alive than to see the relics, because then you can get some real teachings. Anyway, I won't talk much more about that because that is enough, I think. But that's just a little bit of ideas about how to think about the sangha, because the sangha, if it is sangha does the practice well, it is the living expression of the Buddha's teachings. And that is what makes the sangha so important. Okay, so that is then living in balance amid an unbalanced population again. And now we come on to the last two factors. I think we're getting very close to 4:15, so let's have another break, because if we do too much in one go, we just kind of we blow a fuse eventually, and then we'll be in problems. So let's just have another break.